So for today's pod, I will not be bothered by that beautiful sunshine I've had for the past 3 days, averaging 60 degrees Fahrenheit a day during a new northern New England winter. Yeah, pretty fantastic. But back to 39 and a half and normal. But that is what we bargained for. So we just take it. I right off the top, I was laughing at I listened to a few different Iranian spokesmen giving pressers to Al Jazeera and BBC and others, and talking about what it's like dealing with the American. And I'm not ever going to make out the Iranian regime, the in 1979 or the recently departed supreme leader. I'm not trying to ever make excuses for the fact that they did some really horrible things to their very own people and are responsible. They had the blood of American soldiers in Beirut on their hands and heads, and the blood of Israelis and others in the region. Not good people, but but we ain't that great ourselves sometimes either. So let's try to be honest about before we get all white Christian nationalist and mighty. Why don't we let's be honest with ourselves and our viewers and our audiences, and not say that we are the red, white, and blue flag on a white horse, because right from the beginning of our country's history, we've been we have been mired in some pretty horrible decisions. The Karamatsu, which I posted about last night, where we were made the principled decision to intern Japanese Americans during the Second World War. Miserable. Native Americans speaks for itself, and I can't do it justice today in a limited period of time, so I won't try to. But everybody knows uh, uh, slavery again in that same category. So you know, to hear an American president demonizing a recently deceased leader, and the current leader, as I mentioned yesterday, I think, is the middle 50-year-old recently appointed supreme leader, had his father, his mother, his wife, one of his children, and at least three of his other members of his immediate family killed. You know, there are ways to do things, I guess, and elections have consequences. So we can let's try to just have a little bit of humility. And well, the one unifying theme that these Iranian spokespersons, men, but persons, was, I hope you're sitting down, but the American president, Donald J. Trump, has been known to tell a fib or two or three. And so, what is it? You are negotiating. You hope, one of the things you hope above all other things, if you're involved in a negotiation, you're not going to see eye to eye on everything, right? You just hope that you have a good faith actor sitting across the table from you. So if you're on the if you're on the if you're on the debate team when you're a kid, or you're negotiating a $1 billion business deal or something in the middle, you just want a good faith actor as your opponent It's okay to call them an opponent. It's okay to be competitive. It's okay to want to win. That's fine, and it's part of our beautiful capitalist system. But rules are not bad. And telling the truth, if you if you if you have to lie to gain advantage at every turn, not a one-off, not a crucial. You're not in excuse the word existential moment where you have to be deceptive in order to save humanity or your battalion or whatever that turns out to be. Okay. But doing it as a matter of practice to the point the I heard a count and I'll get the number wrong, but in the first in Trump 1.0, fact checkers at Washington Post and otherwise were up to something like, that Trump told 37,000 lies, right? So, which tracked to about 20 per day in the entire first administration. I'm starting to rain, so I'm going to hope that it doesn't. I hope it doesn't get on my glasses, or it doesn't obscure the camera. But we'll just go on. And this was not a podcast to the breaking news that Donald Trump tends to lie about, but it just kind of frames in high stress and negotiations over issues that will affect all of mankind. That's not being hyperbolic, right? This is these are nuclear armed states. Iran, the United States, Russia throwing rocks from the sidelines, President Xi over in China watching on, just wondering when he can get enough loyal generals out of second grade in time to repatriate Taiwan, which he's got to do. Because right now, what are we going to, we're going to stand up and say, that's a violation of the norms that we've come to demand in the world order. We're the United States. We're going to stand on principle, President Xi, and you're not going to behave that way. He's going to laugh his fucking ass off, as he does probably every day, um, at Donald J. Trump's expense, which of course is at our expense as Americans. So yeah, lying once, existential crisis, whatever, you can get you'll find peace with your Lord or your wife or your children, and justify the need to be deceptive for a greater good. Fine. Okay. Move on with turn the page. Get shit done. Talk to your priest. Whatever gets you through the night, as a great man once said. But every single day, there are only 24 hours in a day, and I know Trump doesn't sleep much. He's awake a bunch. We see copies of the tweets. I've managed to not sign up for Truth Social, which makes me feel a little bit cleaner as a human being. But because I can't help myself, I look at on the web, there are various resources to when when there is a particularly egregious truth, or whatever you call his missives. You got to see it for yourself, because it's almost too nuts to believe some of the shit that comes out of his thumbs or mouth. Yeah. In any case, what I was planning on talking about before I got off on liar, liar, pants on fire, depends on fire rants, was data centers. And I put out a little, as I do frequently, a little absurdist take on what might what might a government populated by people of bad faith, of bad intentions do to vulnerable people, right? And so my little, my brief framing of that is that, with corrupt intent throughout, data centers are going to be built. They're going to be built predominantly in red states because Trump can just call up Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and Texas has a lot of land, and not all of it is of tremendous value necessarily. And he can say, Greg, Marky Mark Zuckerberg, and that's with an S, not a Z, needs 275 acres to build a data center. So I want you to give him water and power and the land because he is going to put 27.5 Bitcoin in my son's account at the end of business today if you say okay. Okay, Greg? So that's how Trump does the business that he does. But there are these huge data center projects, many of them in Texas, because of, the regulators will lay down and, pull their pants down and then lay on the ground and do what they are told by Trump, Abbott, and others. That is also the case in other states. In Louisiana, they uh, Louisiana was at the Bulwark. Uh, Tim did that first podcast that I watched a little bit last night, where he was just doing like evening riffs. So that was kind of cool. Tim Miller. Yeah. So big pieces of land, cheap land in states controlled by Republican governors. Mississippi, Louisiana, little wind coming up, so I'm sorry for the background noise. Texas, of course, and in some in Arizona. There are other projects around the country, and in fact, there are two up in Minnesota. And we like to see the nice people of Minnesota getting some consideration. And you know that they will stand up more firmly against the Metas of the world, the Googles of the world, the others that might take advantage of them. But the premise again was red state that will lie down, let you build the facility. But of course, you're in very remote areas, having labor problems to begin with, and then DJT with his insane immigration, deportation, everything that ICE has been doing. So my little absurdist take was, of course, that Trump will give a special visa status to workers from across the border in Mexico and bring them in. And they'll build these giant dormitories where men will live. And then in an area of South Texas or wherever, they will build 2 or 3 of these giant data centers. There's no residual benefit to the local labor force with these things, because essentially they're going to be run by Elon's robots or the equivalent going forward. Right? But to construct these large data centers, that's going to take some hardworking men. I'm saying men, humans, and you're working out in the freaking desert in the summer in Texas, Arizona, Louisiana, and other parts of the South. Hard work. Going to get a bunch of gringos to do it. Good luck. But so Trump gives these what I call the 911 visa program, and it's kind of like a hand grenade where all Trump needs to do is bring in the workers, make them do the work, underpay them, and don't insure them, and then you pull the pin And if you drop the grenade after the pin is pulled, then it's bad news for everybody. And so I thought that what would be more Trumpian than to build these dormitories, you know, dorms, showers, just like a dorm, like a prison, and and the men will live there, build the data centers, and then when the project is over, Trump will declare these people as illegal aliens, arrest them, use those numbers to fluff his ICE and border protection stats, so he can get to the lie number of however many million people deported, and he'll hold them in custody, which those will be converted. The dormitories will be converted into private prisons because you don't need them for employees. The data centers don't need them. Robots don't sleep, and private prison revenue flows to the bottom line of one of the Trump family ventures. So I thought that that was a neat little circular game that had the exploitation, the cruelty, and the self-aggrandizement and corruption that make it a home run for the Trump family foundation, for the Trump businesses. But the real challenge, labor, they'll get labor. It's a matter of how much you pay for it. Building things in challenging environments where Americans, we can do that kind of shit. The data center, the owners, the Metas and the like, they've got the money. They don't want to use their money. They would rather rely on government to build build out the grid to make sure that they have enough power to run their data centers. They'd rather let somebody else carry that cost. They're in business to make money. I understand that. But considering how they behaved in the Trump administration, my approach to gentlemen such as Zuckerberg and Bozos are go fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself. How's that? Try that on for size. Hope it fits. It appears to fit just from your behavior. I was looking at some. Not I wasn't shopping, but I was looking at some Westinghouse nuclear reactors because these data centers, right? If I just said right, like I'm 12, these data centers just eat energy 24/7, no days off. And if you look at like a gigawatt, if enough power, enough to power 1 million homes, these new large scale data centers will require more than that to run. And you're thinking about the grid in your remote Texas town or your remote Arizona desert community. If you got, if you can even get the amount of power needed, what will the effect be on the grid? What will the cost be to the other people, the residential customers and the small business customers in the area? It ain't going to be good. So there are. This is they're thinking about. There's a large public-private partnership in Texas that is just a massive. It's a data center city um, in Texas, and these Westinghouse reactors, they go for about $2 billion a piece for a gigawatt. Right? Can Mark Zuckerberg afford a $2 billion reactor? Well, he will have to. Will it be convenient? I don't care. That we have to, a responsible administration, as we've talked about on this platform before, is like, yeah, well, we're going to try. It's like, well, don't start, don't put a shovel into the effing ground until you get it figured out because you're not tying into the local grid. So, you know, figure it out. Let us know how it's going to happen before you start. All the tax breaks and all that are contingent on you proving that you've made plans that will accommodate the data, the energy requirement for what you're building. Period. Right? Now, some of them, you know what they'll do because they'll get really cute. Say, well, yeah, we're putting wind turbines all over the top of the building, and then solar panels right under the wind turbines. Now, the two problems with that. I mean, there's no problem with that. You want redundancy. If you're going to rely, there's plenty of natural gas in Texas, right? The source of which, we'll get into the. I don't want to get into a fracking argument over this today because obviously that's bad for the environment. But there's access to natural gas, plenty of sun in Texas, plenty of wind in Texas, right? But the wrinkle there, of course, as we've talked about again on this platform, is that Donald J. Trump is antagonistic to the idea of any green energy projects because what that does is it takes away from the many companies that finance his campaigns and put money into his son's bank accounts, big oil, right? So if you're greenlighting wind, solar, battery, even nuclear, then you're taking away for the demand for traditional fossil fuels. Now, obviously, with what's going on in Iran, the whole the whole playbook on fossil fuels is a little bit upside down right now, which is like understatement of the effing century, right? And that's going to persist. I think when I was before I walked out here, that Brent crude was at 98.75. And what Trump will say, it's less than 100. You see, I told you. I would not be surprised, and you will not be shocked to learn that a I'm not a geo whatever the F you are to study that sort of science. I'm not a expert in petroleum sciences. I just made that up, obviously, because it sounds really stupid. But I am not that guy. But I have been following in the financial markets the energy for 40, 50 years. So I mean, I'm pretty conversant, and I also have the perspective, the hysterical, if you're Trump, or historical perspective on what the markets do over time and why, and through the 70s and the gas lines and the critical choke points like you see on the news every day now, that we know much more about Hormuz than you ever wanted to know. How do the Iranians backdoor oil through or outside of Hormuz using shadow ghost fleets to get oil to China? Is this where, after taking away, President Xi has probably a good sense of humor. I don't know. He's not a personal friend. Haven't had the pleasure of talking to him on the phone anytime at all or recently. But we go into Venezuela, where the Chinese were taking whatever the day that the U.S. invaded. We had China was receiving 87% of the Venezuelan output, which is, in round numbers, it's 1 million barrels a day. It's 900,000. Call it a million, right? So China was getting that with a neat little game they were playing. The tankers will go through. They were going through Cuba and siphoning off a little bit for their brothers and sisters in, uh, uh, in communist solidarity. And then they would run it through Malaysia, change the flags 2 or 3 or 5 times along the way, and the oil would get to China around sanctions. And they're masters at doing that, as is Vladimir Putin. Nicolas Maduro. Putin hadn't been to Venezuela for, I think, maybe 15 years, but Maduro had been to Russia a whole bunch of times. You know, it was well-oiled machine, which sounds kind of trite, but you get the idea. They have the workarounds. Now, what's going to happen now? Are we going to, as the United States, are we going to say to China, no oil from Venezuela and no more oil from Iran? Is and then they're suffering all of the frustrations that the rest of the world is for the tankers that can't make it through Hormuz. I haven't seen a any report of a Chinese tanker being hit, but if that happens, things will probably get a little bit even more chippy in that part of the world, because I would imagine that she will put up with some of Trump's bullshit, but right up to the point where it starts fucking with his country and his power, and then he has a lot of ways to cause a lot of pain. It's we know about, we've been through the rare earth game, and that can be they can ratchet that up as well. Since we don't currently, as far as I know, the title hasn't passed on Greenland just yet. So it's a wonderful world, but so much. The data centers are great because it combines AI, corruption, energy, and politics in a neat little package. So I know that we'll be back on the data center beat, because it's a endlessly fascinating subject. What you can argue whether the person delivering the thoughts on that particular subject is endlessly interesting or not, and that's why the part of the country that's still free is you get to choose who you listen to. But I find it fascinating, and again, those all those geopolitical forces and the ultra wealthy and Elon effing Musk and DJT and electrical grids and all of that going at the same time, and labor, right? And and nuclear, a $2 billion Westinghouse reactor, flying it into Texas. Of course, that's, you buy it for 2 billion, but I would imagine that the maintenance on that is probably pretty high. I mean, I haven't. I can fix a Briggs and Stratton engine. You know, 3.5 horsepower. I can probably, if I could see the freaking thing, I could probably rebuild it. Nuclear reactor? Maybe not. Worked on a. I had a Volkswagen. I had a 1969, nice Volkswagen Beetle convertible when I was, 17 or whatever it was. And those were also, because it was made by the Nazis, excuse me, the Germans, and the engine was well made and sort of logical. Now the way that Now the way that engines are made, the amount of chips involved in the process, when it's less more techni more technical, less mechanical, it just, forget it for me. I'm tapping out. That's we'll leave that to the kids. In any case, so that is data centers. That is nuclear data for the title of the pod, and it's a pathway. I was going to say if the regulators will allow, but there ain't no regulation when it comes to Donald Trump or Greg Abbott in Texas. So it would be a really good time if you wanted to build a data center and get it up and running. I would get Westinghouse on the line and say, get I'll take 5, right? Because nuclear power, forget about 3 Mile Island and don't forget about it. But it was a disaster in the 70s where it did a lot of damage to the environment, and it made people less convinced that nuclear was the way to go. But it is today in 2026. They are clean and safe and efficient, and um they don't burn carbon, fossil fuels, and destroy the environment, unless somebody does something really stupid. And we have plenty of people that are qualified to do that. But it's the way. And before I'm a Democratic Party supporter, but from a regulatory point of view, I would suggest get it up and running because they won't take it away after you spent $2 billion on a reactor and you were up and running and providing the the power for these AI data centers, which we're going to need many more of. I was using Claude, not Claude Code, but the regular earlier, just before I got on, and it was you know it had that kind of feeling, like in the old internet days when you were in the first internet days. Even I go back to dial-up, obviously, when there was a lot of demand. People come home from work at 5:45 in the afternoon, and everybody's logging on to check their AOL account. Then things could slow down quite a bit. Now, I put up my hand and I swore that I was not an engineer, but it's just that's when common sense takes over for engineering. If there is an increasing amount of demand for the number of hours of compute, that's what that is. That was in a post from a couple days ago with the NVIDIA founder. Is the the compute is what the that power, right? Combining the chips. We talked about the China trying to keep up with the US and the most advanced NVIDIA chips. And what China's doing is taking the second most powerful NVIDIA chips and stacking more of them, trying to get up to 70 or 80% of where we're running. And that's before the UAE gets the chips and sells them to the Chinese in any case, and does the workaround on the system. Industrial espionage, yeah, it's a thing, and and we see it every single day. And with the loose controls at the White House and the increased amount of corruption every day, if you're being corrupt, if corruption is so endemic in your administration, then it's much easier for others, including China, to further victimize the American tech space, right? Because you're disrupting your own system to such a degree. You're degrading your preparedness because you're injecting so much corruption into it. It has a corrosive effect. That's not disputable. It's a matter of how much. And when you look at the numbers of dollars that the Trump kids are putting in their crypto wallets, um, love to see Bitcoin's been taking a beating, which is kind of fun in when you think about it from a hopefully the Trump kids are taking a bit of a beating. Yeah, so great. And thank you very much for your time. Feel free to share this if I didn't ramble on too long, and I will catch you guys sometime tomorrow. Thanks very much.